Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Sun Yi, the founder of Night Owls and Night Owl Nation, entrepreneur, prolific content creator, TEDx speaker, personal branding expert, Forbes Council member, and storyteller. And so, welcome to the Polymath Polycast.
Thanks for having me, Dustin. Great to be here.
I always like it when I run out of air when I'm doing the description.
That was good. That was good. You kept your air going.
Yes. Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast.
Innovators crave innovative products, which is exactly why the Polymath Polycast is powered by Riverside.fm.
I would say, too, when it comes to having someone like you on the show, it's one of those things where you get the space, you get the podcasting world, you get the whole personal branding thing. And since this is a show built off my personal brand, PolyInnovator, so please say hello to the innovators in the audience.
Hi, innovators. Pleasure to meet everyone.
The way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
No one knows about me. I am pretty open on social media, so I think everybody knows everything about me.
Yeah.
But I moved here when I was 10 years old from Korea. So, yeah, I guess maybe something that people don't know might be that, I was a really, really shy kid. Actually, all the way up until college. So, if you see, like, I talk for a living. So people are like, oh, my gosh. But I am actually a 99% percentile introvert.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you got that sense from me, but yeah, if you met me like 10 years ago, I was quiet as a mouse. I didn't even like open my mouth. Like I would go into a meeting and I wouldn't even say a word.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I definitely think that when I met you, I got that feeling. But since you're able to communicate so well, that it doesn't really matter per se wise. But personalities have always been kind of a passion of mine, and understanding where people are at. So, like on the show, some people want to talk for a really long time because they enjoy doing it. Some people get burned out. I've had a lot of introverts on this show actually really get engaged in the conversation because it's so dynamic and somewhat challenging in a way because it's an interview, and so people get kind of engaged by it. They keep going,
Yeah.
but even still, understanding personalities is a great thing as a host.
Yeah. I just to say, like, if you are an introvert and you're shy or whatever it is something that can be taught, right? Is what I'm trying to say. Like, I obviously, like, I am pretty talkative with people I know when I'm talking to friends and stuff like that. And I was just never, I hated like public speaking or even like, I hated like, in school on the first day when you have to go around introducing yourself. I'm always like, what am I going to say? I'm going to say, like, I'm overthinking in my head what I'm going to say. And like, should I say this? And then I'm like, I'm going to say I like basketball. And then this guy says it. I'm like, I can't say that anymore. Like, so I would overthink the hell out of it until it comes to my turn. And I just stand up and I blur out something stupid. And I kind of like black out. I don't even know what I said. And I sit down and I'm like, I should have said this. And so that was me. You know what I mean? So I think through putting out for the last 3 years, starting my business, because I have talked to my employees, I got a little bit better at speaking to people. And then throughout the last 3 years of making content, I've gotten a lot more comfortable at public speaking, I think, because I realized like public speaking or networking or meeting people is no different than like me talking to my friends.
Yeah.
And yeah.
When you're on stage, you're just talking to a whole bunch of friends.
Yeah, exactly. Also, one bit of advice: when you are public speaking, when you're like, I see a lot of people like talk to the group, and they get hung up on like if somebody's checking their phone, they're like, they like that bothers them, or like somebody's not paying attention, and they try to focus on them. But what you actually should do is focus on the people that are paying attention, right? And that's what I do. Like, I usually I'm talking to one person at a time. Like, I might turn here and talk to this one person, and I see over here who's paying attention. I'll talk to that one person. And usually when I do that, I get really into it. It feels almost like a one-on-one conversation.
Bouncing off in a way.
And when I do that, everybody goes at the end of the talk, they're like, oh my gosh, that was great. Or yeah.
I remember actually when I was watching you do your panel at the conference that we met at, it was interesting how when I was watching it, mind you, I was so dead that day. I was so exhausted that day when you had your panel, but I remember trying to record you on my basically broken phone, and I'm sitting there trying to focus on recording you, but I'm also looking up, like looking at you. It's like, I want to hear what he's saying. And then I remember seeing you look over at someone on the other side of the crowd because they were getting excited. You were talking to them, and you turned this way, and you were looking at me for a little while, and someone behind me was really focused too. So you looked at them, like you made eye contact with each person too. I remember seeing that when you were going back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah. That really helps me. Yeah.
So, what was your mindset 5 years ago, and how have you changed since then?
I've changed. I think I changed a lot in the
Yeah,
last 5 years. So,
given the whole
so
introvert.
yeah. So 5 years ago, first of all, I wasn't even on social media.
Mm.
Like I was very kind of, I consider myself, I work with actually a lot of personal, I own an agency in New York called Night Owls, and we focus on personal brands. Like, so we work with people like Mel Robbins, Jay Shetty, Mark Randolph,
Mm-hmm.
pretty big names. And I always consider myself the person behind the camera, like, right, and behind the curtain. And the ones, the one with the microphone that's handling all the background stuff. And what ended up happening is
Mm.
I started to see how, like, one thing that clicked for me was when I saw like all these billionaires like jumping on and starting YouTube channels and starting podcasts and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I saw like Mr. Beast starting Beast Burgers. I saw Kylie Jenner with her Kylie Cosmetics, and I kind of started seeing like, okay, I think this influence, like personal brand and influence, is kind of the future. Like how I saw how much power people that have a personal brand have, because they can actually influence people, right? And I saw like it's also around time when we started working with Mark Randolph, and I was wondering like these guys can retire. They have They're billionaires. They can
Yeah.
retire. Why are they starting a YouTube channel? Why are they starting a podcast? And so I kind of it clicked for me, and I'm like, okay, I need to start working on my own personal brand. And that led to me starting a YouTube channel. It didn't really work out in the beginning, and then when COVID happened, I started putting out content on Instagram. And this time, let me just tell you what happened. The first time, like this was actually around 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like I bought all this camera equipment and I hired a videographer to I wanted to do the whole Gary Vee thing, and it didn't work out. Like our videos got like 12 views.
Yeah.
So after like 3 months, I kind of like, okay, let's forget this. And then I got busy, and I was like, I'll do it one day, kind of thing. And I didn't. I got busy with my agency, and I didn't focus. And then when COVID happened, we were home,
Yeah.
and you know how like that's when everybody started going meeting on Zoom, and Zoom became a big thing. And I just recorded all my Zoom conversations just to have a backup of it. And I would get into these conversations with my employees or clients, whatnot, and I started taking clips from there
Mm.
and posting them on Instagram, and that kind of started my Instagram journey. And yeah, I'm a completely different person because now, what I didn't realize 5 years ago is like my favorite part of running an agency was actually training, teaching our employees, coaching our clients. Like that was my favorite part. So it wasn't even like design, building campaigns, building episodes, like that. Writing, that wasn't really it, but it was
Mm.
actually in the teaching and learning part. So now, like I'm kind of that's kind of what I consider my purpose. My purpose in life pretty much is to constantly learn and teach,
Learn
which
it.
I believe it's a cycle. Like you learn, you teach, and you learn through teaching, and so on and so on and so on.
Mm.
So yeah, and I think one thing for me one of the biggest realization I had in the last couple of years is that I'm much more fulfilled when I'm making content, and I'm not focused on the content, but on the person that I'm impacting, or right. Like if I focus on the audience and how this is going to help them, right,
Right.
I'm much more fulfilled. Like before, I don't know if you ever feel this way, but before I kind of like, oh, I already said this before, so I don't have to say it again. Like I wasn't really like inspired to say it again, but now I'll say the same thing 100 times if
Yeah.
somebody needs to hear it, right? And Yeah, because I'm focusing on the audience. So yeah,
Well, who knows if they've heard
something
you
like that.
before and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've been a swim instructor for 10 years, so I definitely understand the whole wanting to teach, that kind of thing. So when you said that, that's where my brain first went to. I was like, yeah, I love teaching. I love being able to see that spark in their eyes when something clicks with them. And one thing I learned as a teacher is that sometimes you have to tell somebody something over and over and over again before it finally clicks. That actually like talks about Gary Vee a lot too, where like I had to stop watching his content because he just kept saying the same things over and over again. And he literally said it. He's like, I said, I'm telling you the same thing I said last year. And like I remember him saying that in one of the keynotes, and I'm like, ah. And then like a half a year later, I'm watching this stuff, and I'm like, this is still just the same stuff. Like I want new information. And but that's how a good teacher is, though, because it's trying to help people get to that point.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, he'll say something that I just kind of ignored, and then a few years later, I watch him say the same thing again, and it just hits different.
Yeah.
Like, you know how they say, like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. It's kind of something like that. Like, maybe I wasn't ready back then to listen to this part, and I'm ready now, or something like that. Yeah.
I was talking to somebody recently who's starting out in their content journey, and I was trying really hard not to just be didactic and just teachy to them because they're just starting out, they're just connecting because we had some things in common. And the thing is, where they're at is where I was exactly when I first started out my journey. Like I knew exactly where they were, exactly what they needed to do next. And they're sitting there kind of struggling and trying to figure things out, but they're not receptive to any kind of help. And it was just one of those things where I was like, I can't help this person because not only are they just not open to it, but they're not going to need it. They're not going to, even if I tell them, they're not going to actually receive it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I mean, that's a good point. Like, if somebody, they have to be open to learn. Like I always say this, like I don't think things can just be taught. They have to be learned. And the difference is like, here's a good one. A few years ago, I was watching there's a documentary on, I think it's on the History Channel, or I forgot where, but like World War II in color or something like that. And I was fascinated. So I was watching the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was like so interesting. And I'm like, this is stuff that obviously they cover in high school, but I had zero interest in learning it back then, right? So it just really goes to show you, like unless I have the I guess the interest or the intrinsic motivation to learn something, it was just gonna go in one ear out the other, right?
Yeah. As they say, if your cup is full, you can't put any more tea in it.
Yeah.
So now that I've seen more and more of your works and more of who you've worked with too, no less, I'm even more excited to chat with you today. And so what goes through your mind when you feel the success of helping an expert through fleshing out their personal brand, like Jay or Gabby, that kind of thing?
I personally get more actually fulfillment out of teaching like up and coming entrepreneurs than like somebody who's already successful. But yeah, I mean, I find it fascinating actually. Like when I work with somebody like Jay, I think I learn more from him than like me as a marketer, like us as marketers, we feel like, oh, we're the expert, right? But the thing is, there are some people who are like born marketers. And usually when I meet marketers, like expert marketers, they're not born marketers. They went to marketing school or they learn marketing, right? But if I meet somebody like Gabby, Jay, or somebody like Mel Robbins, they're born marketers, meaning they just innately know what people want, right? So I would like design something and I would come up with something and I'll show it to Jay, and like I will spend like 2 days on it, and he'll in like 30 seconds he'll be like, oh, why don't we say this here and why don't we change this to here? And I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. Like they just understand innately what people want, and I think that's why they're so successful, right? And I kind of I kind of think of it as like, I think a lot of people in marketing, like I meet creative directors who's been in the business for 30 years, or they're like, oh, let's do this campaign like this, and they'll come up with some idea, and and then like they'll make the video and nobody watches it on YouTube or something like that, right? And then some 20-year-old kid posts something on TikTok and it gets like 20 million views, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, like, there's something about that, right? This kid knows something you don't know, right? Because he knows how to make something that people are going to watch where you think you think you're the expert, but you don't really know what. And at the end of the day, I feel like that's kind of where marketing is going, where it doesn't matter what you're expert. If you've been doing something for 30 years, you're expert in marketing. At the end of the day, the numbers are going to tell.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I'm learning. It kind of humbled me working with them. But to be honest, like, I get more fulfillment from helping somebody who's starting out. Like, for example, like, my favorite story I like to tell is when I got on Instagram, there was this girl. She's like a 19-year-old girl in India
Hmm.
her name is Hina, and she was so shy. She would make these carousels on Instagram, but she would never go on video. And I was on IG Live one day, and she asked me, like, "Son, how can I be more confident to come on video?" And I just, like, invited her right there. It's like, "Oh,
Ah.
just come on here." And then and she came on the IG Live, and we had a conversation. And like, that gave her kind of a little bit of confidence on coming up on video. I jumped on a Zoom call with her afterwards, and at that time, she was like her family, like, the average household income in India is like $300 a month,
Yeah.
right? I told her, like, she's a great designer and she coaches Canva. I said, you should be charging $150 an hour. Here's a client. I sent her a client. This client paid her $300 for 2 hours of work, 2 hour coaching session, which is like basically what her parents make in a month,
Yeah.
right? And she was like mind blowing, and she, like, kind of like shifted her mindset. And fast forward years later, now she's on YouTube. She's putting on video content every day. She just she just did a workshop in front of like 100 people, and she sent me a video. She's like, oh, like, and every time she does that, she'll send me a message and she said, "Son, I just want to thank you so much. Like, if I haven't met you, and you haven't, like, given me that motivation, I would never be where I am today." And that makes me feel way more happier
Yeah.
than
Huge rush of
working with,
dopamine.
like, yeah, exactly. Like, I rather do that all day than work with any celebrities.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like like in the fitness world, when I was a personal trainer, there'll be this newbie gains, and so when you first work out, you get that kind of quick progress. So like, hey, I got a lot of muscles,
Yeah.
a lot of strength, really quickly, and a lot of people kind of lose confidence after that because they don't get the same progress the next time they hit that growth. And people just don't realize that. But getting past that newbie gains, like your first set, it puts you in a whole different mindset about exercise. And then after that, you get your next little set of extra boosts, whether it's of size or strength, regardless, you get that next progress. Those first two are just so monumental for a lot of people. Their whole mindset shifts like, wow, I can actually change my body through this type of movement. And yeah, it's kind of that similar mindset there where you can just see that click, like I said, in their head.
Yeah. I think that's so important, and I think that's kind of like what I'm trying to do for most of my members in Night Owl Nation.
I definitely see that. Now, we met at the Podcast Movement Conference, and that was a fantastic expo there. What were your thoughts on PodMove 23, by the way?
It was awesome. Like, it completely opened my eyes, because podcast isn't my main thing.
Yeah.
Like, I do podcasts, but it's not the main thing that I focus on. And yeah, I met a lot of people there. I saw a whole world of podcasts that I didn't even knew existed. Like, because there's a lot of storytelling podcasts, there's educational, like, the only kind of podcasts I listen to are things like this, right? Like,
Yeah, no, the
personal
educational
development,
one, yeah.
like, yeah, like
Me
the
too.
interview type of podcast. Yeah. So I saw a whole world of podcasts that I didn't know existed. I was surprised by all the new technology, like all the
Yeah.
AI. And I was like, because, like, as you saw, like, half the vendors, they were like some sort of an AI software
Yeah.
or something like that, right? So that was amazing. And yeah, just meeting all the different people that are in podcasts. Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, I loved it.
I remember like whenever I was on the app, I was looking at people to like meet up with before the conference, and I only added maybe like 12, 15 people, and you were one of those people, and it was one of those things where I was like, I want to talk to him. So I was like, you're like one of the two people I set up a meeting with to talk. And I remember us sitting down, me, you, and Gigi, and just having a nice conversation there. And we were both just nerding out. Like you and I just immediately started nerding out about tech and tools and just kind of chilling about that. I feel like I almost regretted not going to some panels because I went in fully with the mindset of networking. Like I skipped half the keynotes because I wanted to go talk to people and meet people, and I thought I'd be able to listen to it afterwards, and I guess I can now on Spotify at least, which is good. Like, oof. But I was worried that I was going to be able to not watch them. But I remember like choosing between a panel and talking to somebody, and that talking to somebody led to a really strong conversation. And it's just one of those things where it's a mindset shift, I feel like, as well. But there was a lot of AI generative panels, and I was like, I already know about this particular topic. Are they going to say anything that I haven't heard yet? Maybe, maybe not. The sacrifice of opportunity cost, I don't know if it's worth it.
No, I think you made the right choice. I've been to a lot of these things, and and 99% of the time when I go in to hear somebody talk, I'm like, I heard this before, or it's underwhelming, right? And like, I feel like pretty much all of the benefits of going to those things is networking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you definitely made the right choice. Like now, most of the times, what I do is I was more talking about the vendors, like
Yeah.
the software vendors, not the keynotes or the panels. But now I go into a conference and I don't even go to the panels. I just thought, yeah, like you said, right? Like I just skip the panels because I've just been burned so many times
Yeah.
on these things where I just go there, I sit there for an hour. I'm like, that's it.
Yeah.
You know?
Low hanging fruit kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of those AI panels were people talking from those companies. That's the reason why I was like, oh,
Mhm.
maybe I should like see something what they have to say. And like, there was some good ones there, but I think it's more along the lines if you're more beginners or kind of medium level. But yeah.
Mhm.
Speaking of podcasting, what got you started on the Authentic as Fuck podcast?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I love having long form conversations with
Mm-hmm.
people, and my podcast has actually evolved. So in the beginning, one of my clients, we would like jump on every week to talk about work, and we go off on this tangent of like conversation, and we're like, we should record this conversation and turn it into a podcast. So we're like, let's do it, and then so I started doing that with her,
Mm-hmm.
and then after a while, she kind of like life got in the way, and she had a baby, and like so she couldn't do it anymore. And at that time, I turned it into kind of our members. I do coaching calls with people, and I'm like, it'll be really helpful if people can listen in on some of these coaching calls.
Yeah.
So I started like having some of our members sign up, and I would coach them on a podcast, and we did that for a while, and then it got a little bit repetitive because a lot of people kind of asking the same questions, like how do I grow Instagram, or
Yeah.
those kind of things. So after a while, we just made a shift again like 2 episodes ago, and now what we're doing is people love my carousels on Instagram, and like they want to know like how do you come up with the idea for those carousels and how do you make them. So now what I'm doing is like somebody would come with an idea, like I want to talk about this, and then I'll talk it through, and we'll try to write it into a carousel and then actually create the carousel together. And it's interesting because a lot of people ask me like, son, I just want to know how your brain works.
Yeah.
And when I make those carousels, it's not like I have some step-by-step formula that I'm following. It's just I just do it. I don't know how I do it, right? But through this process, what I'm realizing is like there is actually a method to the madness, and it's helping me reverse engineer that. Like, to give you an example, what I noticed is that when I write carousels, I have these what I call anchor words. So, for example, if I write a carousel that on one slide it says, so the other day we made one where, you know how therapists say you're perfect exactly the way you are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we were trying to debunk that concept, right? And then, but in the middle of it, what I do was I explained that a therapist saying you're perfect exactly the way you are is kind of similar to a parent saying to a child, you're perfect exactly the way you are. And like I was trying to explain that, like if your parents keep saying that to their child, that the child is going to come out spoiled, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end, the lesson is you're not perfect exactly the way you are. Like you actually have to improve yourself, right? But what I'm doing is I'm anchoring those 3 slides by using the word you're, perfect exactly the way you are.
Mm-hmm.
And by repeating the same words over and over, it shows the audience, like it's easier for the audience to grasp that, okay, I see that he's trying to compare this idea to this idea.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I just do naturally. I do it when I tweet, like, but I didn't realize that I was doing that, right? Until we started breaking down. Because like usually what happens is I'll start creating the carousel, and then the person who came up with the idea, she'll tell me like, why did you do it that way? Why did you do that? Why are you using this image? So like she'll ask me those questions, and then I'll answer her. I'll be like, oh, it's because if I say this, then people are not going to get what that means. But if I say this, then they will get it. And,
Yeah.
So that explanation period process helped me like actually think through what I'm doing,
Like the
which I
blueprint of
normally
it.
don't do. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Honestly, too, I think I was watching either one of your videos or perhaps I don't know, maybe just an interview of someone talking to you, but someone was asking, or maybe it was a TED Talk actually. It was talking about just the way you were doing your carousels and just your content in general. And the interesting thing was, my brain was like, he's just doing content repurposing. Like he's just taking one thing and turning it into another thing. He's doing it in a very unique way. But like it seems so simple to me. But I think it's just because I'm so used to this world. But I think that's the best thing. Like if it is simple, then that's what people are going to understand. But it takes a while
Hmm.
to get a perfect simplicity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like you can get quotes from different interviews and stuff like that, and then just turn those into carousels, and then turn them into tweets, and turn them into quote
Hmm.
images, and just keep that process going as long as you could.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people overthink content.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and usually like I mean myself too. Like usually it's the content that I don't overthink that always goes viral. Whenever I overthink it, it's just I never underestimate how simple content has to be,
Mm-hmm.
because and just through like doing marketing stuff, even on the website, or when I started putting out content, whenever I just overthink something and make something like too complex, like thinking like, oh, this is gonna be awesome,
Mm-hmm.
like nobody ever gets it. And like a good example is this: like we designed a app for Columbia University Medical Center, and we wanted to user test it, so we kind of gave it to like 20 of the patients and have them go through it. And like all the instructions were very clear, like, okay, like if you have questions, click here, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as they opened it up, they just started clicking around even without reading, and they were kind of messing up the user flow. And
Oh
I'm like,
no.
no. And I was watching them, and I'm like, no, you're not supposed to click that, blah blah blah. But that's when I realized that like you can't underestimate like how dumbed down your UI has to be, like how
Yeah.
dumbed down your content has to be, because people are busy, right? They're not reading, they're not, they're on Instagram waiting in Starbucks waiting for their
Yeah.
coffee, and they're just doing that, right? It's not the same thing as sitting in a room opening a book
Yeah.
with a tea and just with that focus reading a book. It's not. So a lot of people don't understand that concept. Like, nobody's looking at your post like they're
Yeah.
reading a book, right? They're just swiping through it.
Now, speaking of some of your carousels, one of them that stuck out to me was the multi-passionate one, the truth about being multi-passionate. And so you had brought up Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule, and essentially that leverage focus, and just having that kind of like, hey, pick that 80%, put your heart into that one. Those 20% can come maybe later. Can you explain more on your thought process on that?
Yeah. So I first realized this. I actually think that I somebody was talking about Leonardo da Vinci and how he was a chemist and how those other disciplines actually made him a better painter, right? And I was thinking about that, and it just kind of like hit me because I started my career as a designer, right? So like a visual designer, so like typography, colors, like making something pretty or something like that, right? And then I started to learn how to code, and I really got into that. I got into filmmaking, photography, and then I got into really copyright. So I had multiple disciplines. I was really into multiple disciplines at different points in my life. And I think the difference is this, right?
Mhm.
I think a lot of people think that multipassionate or, maybe polymath or something like that means jack of all trades. Like, you know a little bit of everything. But that wasn't what I was. Like, if you put me against designers, I'll be in the top 99 percentile of designers, right?
Yeah.
If you put me against, or 1 percentile, is it 1 percentile or 99? But
99
whatever it
cents
is,
about right.
right?
Top 1%.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you put me against like programmers, I will be on the top 1 percentile of programmers. If you put me against, copywriters, I will be at the one. Like, I didn't just dabble in these things. I spent years really honing in and really getting into them, right? Like, to a point where I could have been an expert just in that field. So later on, when I started my agency and I started building, like, to give you an example, we did kind of like the second version of Swell Bottle's website. I don't know if you know Swell
I
Bottle,
saw in one of your
but
videos. Yeah.
yeah. So in that website, I did that website pretty much by myself in 5 weeks, and that website ended up winning so many awards. Like, that client literally, at the time, she was kind of running her business out of her apartment, and then by next year, like in the next 2 years, they became $100 million company. Okay. But this website, and then this website started winning all the awards. But this website explains kind of like, uh, this was like 10, 12 years ago. But there's a video that I made about it where it explains how the bottle stays hot for 24 hours. And the background, like, I made it so that so first of all, when you first go, you see the bottle. And then as you scroll down, the bottle kind of turns like this, and then at a certain point you see the inside of the bottle. And I was able to do that because I understood first of all 3D rendering and taking like little slice of shots. And because I understood JavaScript, I knew that as I scroll, I can show this frame, and I scroll 10 pixels more, show this. like like I understood that I can do that, right? These kind of websites didn't exist back then. And then as you scroll down, now that bottle changes into an actual bottle, and then the background changes from like a hot beach to a cold winter, and so the background keeps changing. And with the background changing out there, I'll say it stays hot up to 12 hours, stay cold up to 24 hours, and all the different benefits of the bottle. And anyway, like, the reason why that website was so effective, like it literally like sold way more bottles, is because I understood copywriting and sales, and I knew that I had to sell the concept of the bottle first before somebody would buy it. I understood photography and videography, so that I knew how, like, which background to use, how to change the background, and how to make it seamless with the bottle, and also spinning the bottle. I knew programming. That's why I knew that as you scroll, we can do this animation in a certain way. And obviously visual design is
Key.
the
Yeah.
the final part of it.
Yeah.
And then people come to me and be like, "Son, oh, this website is so awesome! Like, oh, like, you're such a good designer." That's what they say, right? But what they don't understand is I could have given this project to any the best designers in the world, and they couldn't have done it the way I did it, because they don't have all these other disciplines, right? So yeah, so I understood how my other discipline, like knowing how to code, made me a better designer. Um, knowing photography actually made me a better designer. Knowing copywriting made me a better designer. And I could kind of relate to, okay, like that's kind of what Da Vinci was doing, like learning chemistry. Like he was a chemist, and they said that he was able to come up with some colors and like of human color, like human skin tone and something like that other painters could not. And his painting were much more realistic than other painters because he understood the human biology and things like that, right?
Also
And I was like,
architecture
oh,
as well.
that's yeah, like pretty much anything, like engineering,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So I think that really resonated with me, and that's actually when I started learning about polymath and um, Renaissance man and all of those things, right? And yeah, so I definitely, and then what I realize now is two things. First of all, most people are not polymaths. Like most people that think that they're polymaths, they're a jack of all trades, meaning they know a little bit of design, they know a little bit of coding, they know a little bit of these things, and that they think that they're interested in a lot of things, but it's actually not, because
It's more
so I
superficial.
mean that's its own thing, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not what a polymath does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can't give up one or the other. They feel like they have to do everything. So I guess two different things.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you really are a polymath and you're really deep into these things and you don't understand these things really well, I think what you should do is you should do those things, but understand that you're going to be known for one thing. Like, I'm not, at least back then, I wasn't known for copywriting. I wasn't known for coding. I wasn't known for photography, but I was known for design. Do you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why I was known for design is because of all those other things, right? I feel like right now people get too carried away with titles. Like, oh no, but I don't just want to be a designer, son. I'm much more than a designer. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like
Yeah.
you're that's what people are coming to you for, right? Yeah, maybe all these other things are helping you, and you know how to do all those other things. But at the end of the day, people are asking you for designer. They see you as a designer, right? Now, if you are multi-passionate, what I think you should do is what I tell people to do is focus 80% of your time on the thing that makes you money. Because once, if you don't, there doesn't matter how much passion you have about anything, without money you're gonna have to go back to a 9 to 5 job or something like that, right? So focus 80%, and then 20% of the time pursue those other things you're interested in, and at one point that 20% might become the 80%.
It's a good point, son. And I mean, before I answer my next question, pretty important one, jack of all trades, generalist, and polymath kind of thing, that little chart. I want to explain that to you here in a bit, but something I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you? And you sort of talked about it already, obviously, but what is it to you?
Yeah, I think polymath are, to me, it seems like somebody who is naturally curious,
Hmm.
because I think you naturally need that kind of curiosity to go down that rabbit hole. To
Or
like,
multiple.
because that's what happened to me. Yeah, because yeah, exactly, that's what happened to me actually. You go down this rabbit hole and you learn so much. You have to go so deep into it. Not just, most people like kind of, oh, I know how to do that now, and then that's where they give up, right? Like, that Dunning-Kruger graph.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen
Dunning
it, like
Kruger.
in
Yeah.
the beginning there. Yeah. So once everybody thinks that, oh, I got this now, because usually at that point there's actually way more to learn about the subject. But in the beginning, when they learn a little bit about it, they think they know everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where most people stop learning. But then, like, a polymath, I think, goes way deeper, and they realize, holy shit, like there's actually way more to this than I thought, right? And then at some point, maybe they get bored and they dive into this other curiosity,
Yeah.
or something like that.
No, it's a great explanation, son. And one thing that we were talking about earlier is like the progression. So I talk about those newbie gains, for example. That's just where my context comes from as a fitness expert. And so just kind of explain it again, like that first bit of progress is exponential because your body is in shock from all the new stimuli that you're giving it. And so your body's like, okay, cool. Well, we need more strength. We need more muscle. Let's go for it. And it's like it's like that Dunning effect where you have way whole bunch of progress in a short time span. So you think
Mm-hmm.
you know a lot, and in actuality, you probably know more than most people. But regardless, or you've made more progress than most people in that case. But then you hit that plateau, and whether or
Mm-hmm.
not you actually know what you're talking about is
Mm-hmm.
if you go past that plateau and the next one and the
Mm-hmm.
next one. And those plateaus could be a simple subject, it could be another subject in that same skill tree, it could be literally just physical prowess too, depending on what
Mm-hmm.
topic it is. But being able to push past those plateaus, and I think that's the difference between like a generalist and a polymath, is a polymath has been able to push past those plateaus as much.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of it's I naturally have a very curious. I'm a very curious person,
Mm-hmm.
so I do go down like if I start going onto Wikipedia, I can spend hours in it, like just
Yeah.
going down the rabbit hole. But I rarely meet people like that. Most people are very like on the surface level. If they understand something, like a lot of times when I go into a meeting and I don't understand something, I'll keep asking questions. I'll keep digging, digging, digging. Like, I don't understand. Like, what
Yeah.
do you mean by that? And people get annoyed. But what I realize is that most people don't. Like when they're in a meeting and they don't really understand something,
Yeah.
they'll be like, yeah, yeah, okay. Like, and if they're like any questions, people are like, oh no. Like, so it's yeah. So I think that's why a lot of people think that they know more than they actually do. You know.
I like surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me, and people have told me I'm smart. That's great. This person has a PhD or is working towards a PhD. They know way more about that subject than I do.
Yeah.
Even if,
Yeah.
even just a
Exactly.
little bit rubs off on me, that's conversation starter for
Hmm.
another person.
Hmm. Hmm. For sure.
And so before I ask the next question, I just want to tell you something that I've worked on that I think is really helpful. And it's kind of a graphics thing too. So maybe you can look at it later on, see if you have any opinions on the actual design of it. But it's called a multidisciplinary spectrum. So there's all these different terms that people use, they identify with when it comes to being multi-passionate. And this idea of being a multi-potentialite, the potential to do many different things. That's kind of like, that's great, but that's not, the potential is not the same as actually doing those things, right? So I have that
Hmm.
towards the beginning. Then you have jack of all trades, which they spent some time, that might be a novice in many different areas, upwards of 15 perhaps even too. So way too many areas. But the jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one because those different areas gives them that intertransactional thinking. Eventually, they narrow down to maybe 3 to 5 areas, perhaps a little bit more depending on like what kind of generalist they are, but they level up to a generalist. After a generalist has gotten to a multi-specialist level in at least 3 areas, and they have that insatiable curiosity, like you were talking about before, that's what makes them a polymath. And there's some people out
Hmm.
there who are in the polymath space who talk about contributing to those fields. So, like if you're a designer making a designer book, or perhaps doing a dissertation on design or something, just contributing to that field in some way, and that's what makes you an expert in that field per se, too,
Hmm.
which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually think generalists make a good businessman, like a CEO. Like as you build a business, at some point you need to be a generalist that works with specialists, right?
Yeah.
And kind of, and I think that's like a job of a typical CEO, right? Like Elon Musk is not a typical CEO.
Yeah.
Like he would be like the polymath, right? Like where he's a CEO. I guess he's not a CEO because
Not anymore.
he hires
I mean, he,
CEOs
he has
to,
so many companies.
yeah. But I mean, if you look at his companies, all of his companies has CEOs.
Hmm.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's not the CEO of his companies. So, but like I would consider somebody like him a polymath.
Yeah.
So, so I actually think generalists are not bad. They they're great if you want to be a CEO.
Yeah. Well, and we've had entrepreneurs all throughout the last like 60 years or so, and they're all jack of all trades because you have to wear many hats in order to get your business off the ground. Even if you're not great at
Mhm.
marketing, you have to do at least some smidgen of marketing to get the business going.
Exactly.
And it's interesting too when it comes to people having this idea, like what you just said there. Like I wanted to move on to the next question, but I have to respond to that
Mhm.
because people have this concept of jack of all trades, master of none, and that partial phrase of the full phrase is allowing society, people in society to think, oh, that's a bad thing because they're a master of none. But
Yeah.
the actual
Yeah.
saying continues, but oftentimes better than a master of one. I know you know that because it was in the
Yeah.
post too, but like not everyone knows that. That's only half the saying. And so their
Yeah.
context in their head is that
That's true.
being multidisciplinary, being generalist is bad. But ironically, we've had generalists throughout our entire human existence. So that's just me on a little tangent, but like, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of things are like that. Like you know that quote, curiosity killed the cat.
Yeah.
But the rest of the quote goes, but satisfaction brought it back.
Mm.
So there are a lot of quotes where we misquote because you know it fits our agenda or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
So this is kind of a random question, but I was very curious about it. What inspired the bichromatic black and white style of your content?
You know, at first it was I do yoga, and there's this a yoga studio in New York called Y7 Yoga, and they did all black and white
Mm.
feed, and their whole brand was black and white. I was like, oh, this looks cool. Let me try this, right? And then like when I started doing it, it was just because I thought it looked cool. But as the more I started doing it, like it made more sense because of three reasons. One, it stands out because everybody uses color, right? So like as soon as I start doing black and white, because a lot of people will say, hey, like I love your black and white feed or something like that.
Yeah.
And then two, I am actually kind of like I have a black and white personality, which is not necessarily always a good thing, but I'm a very all or nothing
Mm.
type of personality. So when I get really into something, I go all in. And you know, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But like that, I'm a little bit like that. And I think a lot of programmers are like that because, you know, computers are ones and zeros, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no halfway in between. And then finally, I also wanted to prove that at the time when I started, there were a lot of designers they saying, "Oh, you need to use popping colors to catch people's attention when they're scrolling. You want to have that color to really." And I actually started seeing a lot of those kind of advices on Instagram where they're like, "Oh, you got to use these hashtags and you got to do it like they were giving all these like Instagram hacks
Mm-hmm.
to get more views and things like that." And I guess I just wanted to prove that actually, you know, I because you know, if you look at my Instagram post, I don't use any of that. I don't. My captions were long. They say keep your captions short. My captions are long. I don't use hashtags. I don't use eye popping colors. And I just wanted to prove that if you just make a good content and if you tell a good story or if you're providing good content, that none of those things matter. And at the same time, you can be doing all of those things right. If you don't have good content, none of those things are going to help you, right? Like I just, it, and that's something that I like. Actually, my whole brand is built around on is that at the end of the day, if you want to grow Instagram, you want to grow social media channel, you just gotta have you focus on the providing good content,
Yeah.
and the rest will happen. Like uh, so don't try to take the shortcut like the hacks, right? to so I think that's one of the reasons why I kept it black and white because I just wanted to prove that point. And and uh, and like a year later, I did a post where I said the exact same thing. I didn't use color. I didn't use hashtag. I didn't follow any of the hacks, and I still grew Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
You're
something
like,
like that.
boom.
Yeah, exactly. For sure.
What made you start the Night Owl Nation?
So, as I said, like I really enjoyed making content on and like the story that I told you about that girl Hina. Like I really enjoyed teaching, right? So and people kept DMing me.
Mm-hmm.
Say, first, like I had this company Domestica, they're like an online course platform, reached out to me and asked me to create a storytelling course for them. I'm like, really? Okay. And I made a storytelling course for them. And that one ended up getting 22,000 students. And then and people keep asking me, son, can you teach me storytelling? Can you, like, people kept asking me to teach, right? So I was in the middle of creating an online course. And I got into kind of like an existential crisis because when, my job before that was, I make sales pages, websites for some high ticket courses,
Mhm.
high ticket programs, and things like that for clients. And in copywriting, we use like a very typical language, like people say, sell the result, not the features, that kind of things. So I'm like, hey, if you want to, like, if let's say I'm doing a website for you, right? And let's say you happen to be a trainer, like let's say you were still a personal trainer. I'll be like, hey, you know do you want to have like a six-pack body by in 6 months? Like, take a look at these people, and like very infomercial style, like sales pages where they convert. Like these things convert. You can sell a lot more by doing certain things. And when I was working on my own, at that time I was going to create an Instagram course, and I was working on my own, and I was writing my sales page, and I felt a little bit manipulative. Like it felt a little bit manipulative.
Mm.
Like I had no problem doing it for clients, but for me it didn't feel right because I was saying, hey, do you want to group, do you want to know how I got 50,000 followers in 6 months?
Mm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
those are like the copies, but I felt manipulated because I knew that actually majority of people, maybe 80 to 90% of people who take the course, is still not going to have that result. And the reason why I knew that is because, number one, most people don't actually finish an online course.
Yeah.
Like they buy an online course, they start it, but they don't finish it. And even the ones that finish it, they don't actually put in the work of posting content every day. And even if they did, their storytelling is gonna suck.
Yeah.
So that it's still not gonna work, right? So I felt a little bit, and then I started going back and look at all the old sales pages I've done for other people, and I'm like, oh, I kind of got into an existential crisis because I'm like, is my whole career a lie? Like,
Mm.
did I make an entire career on manipulating people to buy things that they don't want to buy? Like, that's what marketing is at the end of the day, right? And then, so I actually didn't post content for like 9 months at all. I just kind of disappeared.
Mm.
And everyone was like, son, where are you? What happened to you? And like all of that stuff. And around that time, I was talking to my sister. Both my sister and my mom are professors. And we were talking about education and things like that. And, they were also confirming that, like, yeah, it's about like consistently doing the practice. It's more about the practice than the teaching, right? So that's when I kind of like reinvented myself. And I said, I want to create a platform where I'm not just teaching, but we're actually practicing the things that we learn, right? So that's why instead of making a course, I decided to do a membership, and slowly, like, and that was my only goal. My only goal is for people to come and practice, because unless you practice storytelling, you're actually not going to get good at it.
Mhm.
And then it evolved from there. At first I was just like, okay, I'm just going to do a Zoom call every week. I started very messy. I just threw out in Instagram stories, here's the Zoom link, come on Sundays, right? And then for 4 weeks, we met every Sunday. And then after 4 weeks, like I was like, let's turn this into like a legitimate thing. And that's when I signed up for Circle.
Mhm.
I I put everything in there, and then people are like, oh, like I was like, what should we call this? And people suggested calling it Night Owl because my agency is Night Owl. And then we're like, okay, let's call it Night Owl. Like, and it just evolved from there.
Mhm.
It's not like I had some grand vision, and even throughout there, it changed a lot. Like after like 3 months, I was like, I was listening to this podcast once from this church talking about like small group, how this small group uh saved this church during COVID, because when all the other churches were losing congregation, like this church stayed strong because they had strong small groups. and people were meeting in small groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I got the idea for small groups, and we started implementing small groups, and it just went from there, and it's still evolving now. Every round we do it, we always make some tweaks, and yeah, that's kind of how we started.
That's a great explanation, son. And I will say too, when it comes to marketing, it isn't about trying to sell somebody something they don't want. It's about trying to connect the person who wants to buy something and the person who wants to sell something and putting them together, even if it is something that they might not think they want, or maybe they do want it. Like I found so many great products or companies through ads on Instagram or Facebook. In fact, at one point, I remember the ads being so good that I actually cared more about my ad feed than my news feed. I was like, Facebook, show me the ads. I want to see more ads because you're showing me stuff that I haven't seen yet, which is saying something. Let me see this. So that was, yeah, that's an interesting story with the night owls. Would you consider yourself a night owl as well? Is that why you called it that?
Yeah, I guess originally I'm not a night owl in a sense of like I don't stay up at night.
Okay.
I wake up pretty early.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say I'm actually a night owl, but I'm a night owl at heart.
He is an imposter, everybody.
Exactly, I'm a liar. It's like when I was in college, I remember like, and throughout my 20s, I was a night owl. Like I would do all my creative work at night. And when I started my agency, I wanted to kind of have that feeling of like, I remember when we were in college, like we would stay up at night and we would have these like philosophical discussion, work on projects, and like, and that's where all the best ideas came from at night, right? In the middle of the night when everyone's sleeping. And I wanted to kind of have that a little bit of that feeling in my agency. That's why I called it Night Owl. But yeah, now I'm actually not a night owl anymore. I wake up pretty early.
You betrayed us, son. You betrayed us.
I know.
Well, and it's interesting too because sleep chronotypes are just one of those subjects that's not super proven yet, but it makes a lot of sense about like we needed people of both kinds. Like we needed people who were early risers who can go take on the day, go hunt, go stuff like that. But we also needed night owls to defend the tribe at night or the village at night. You know what I mean?
That's true.
And so like we actually need. It's just like generalists and specialists. We need both. Like you need both night owls and early birds. You need both generalists and specialists. And people don't understand that that's a dichotomy, not like opposites per se.
Yeah.
How would you? This is kind of a heavy question, but how would you define your why?
So, I spent ever since I read "Start with Why" that really hit me, and I've been searching for my why for like 10 years. At first, I was like, okay, my why is to help these startup entrepreneurs, like because I was building apps and stuff for startups in the beginning. To help startup entrepreneurs, like bring their products into the world. And then like I kept changing, and then that didn't really work out. I was like, no, that's not right. And then like a few months later, we were actually working with a lot of pharmaceutical companies and hospitals for a while. And then like my why kept changing. Like it was, I could never find a why that was like, and those years were some of the unhappiest years of my life, searching for my why, because I kept thinking I need some great why, like Simon Sinek says, that I need to keep, that's my mission for life or something like that. And then, so I did that for about 10 years. I was miserable. My business actually started growing once I stopped looking for my why.
Okay.
Like my business was like, because when I was looking for my why, I'm like, no, I don't resonate with that. Oh no, that's not it. That's not it. And I kept changing directions, and nothing was happening. And then once I was like, I don't care, whatever. And then I just like kept coming to work office every day because I needed to work on this project for this client. I just did the daily work, and then my business actually started growing because I didn't keep flip-flop. I didn't keep overcorrecting, right? And then around that time, like about 10 years into this, I read this book called Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like for me, My why, this is it, because that really resonated with me, because almost everything that I've ever achieved in my life, I didn't set out to achieve it. I didn't, that wasn't my goal, right? So for example, there happened to be an HTML book on my desk when I was a senior in high school. And I was like, oh, what is this?
Mhm.
And then I just started kind of like playing around with HTML because I was like really curious about it. I was like, oh, hey, did you know I can make a website? Like, and this was in '97. Nobody was
Yeah,
making websites back then. And yeah, so I was like, oh, and then I would show my friend and be like, oh, let me make something for you. And that's actually how I got into making websites. And there was a company I was working part-time back then. I made a website for them.
Mhm.
And then I used that as a like kind of my portfolio to get another part-time job here making websites. And that's how I even got into this world, right? And I started freelancing, and at some point I wanted to be a filmmaker. You see how how I said I got really into filmmaking.
Yeah.
So I went to New York Film Academy, and I started like getting into film, and I wanted to like save money to buy a camera, like so I could make my film. And that's why I started freelancing,
Mm.
to save money. But then my freelancing actually turned it into night owl. And so here's a good example. Like when I was in high school, I used to work in this place called Kumon, which is a math learning center. And I was a grader. I would grade papers there, right? And my job was to look at the answer sheet and, like match the answers and say, okay, correct, incorrect, blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
right? But I just wanted to be the fastest. So I memorized all the answers instead of like having to look back and forth between the answers. I just I memorized the answer, so I became like the fastest grader there, like by far, like by 3 times as much, right? And I feel like the best things in my life happen that way.
Mhm.
When I got so curious about something, or I just wanted to be the fastest or the best in something, and I just went all in, without some sort of agenda of, oh, this is going to help me achieve this goal.
Mhm.
And that always led me to opportunities. The same thing with the website thing. I was like, oh, I want to see if I can make this kind of website, and that led me to this opportunity. And almost everything that I created in my life happened that way, of me just focusing on the thing that's in front of me and trying to be the best at that thing always led me to opportunities, and then I got to where I am through there, right?
Yeah.
So when I read that book, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is it. Like all the greatest things that happened in my life happened because I was completely present. I wasn't thinking about building this website is what it's gonna get me in the future, what it's gonna like, uh, past or future. I was just focused on that task. Another great example is like when I did Gabby Bernstein's website, which was the first personal brand website that I did. I just wanted to make the best personal brand website in the world, and we did stuff on that website that no other website has done before. And that website actually took me 6 months to build. It was only supposed to take me like 3 months, but it took me 6 months, and we lost money on that project. But I didn't care.
Mhm.
I just wanted to do the best job, right? And once we finished that website started ranking going on all these blogs about top 10 personal brand website, and it was featured everywhere. When other celebrities went to Gabby and said, hey, like when she's at a book event, people would be like, who did your website? And then Gabby would introduce us. And that led to, I wouldn't be teaching about personal branding and working with personal brands today
Mhm.
if I didn't do that back then, right? So it's kind of like, but it wasn't like back then when I was doing Gabby's website. I was like, I'm gonna do this because this is the thing that's gonna put me on the map for personal brands, and I'm gonna start.
No.
That wasn't it, right? So my why, if you ask me why my why, I don't have a why. I would say my why would be to just try to be the best in the thing that's in front of you right now, and that for me is talking to you.
Yeah.
For example, I'm just trying to have the best conversation as I can possible, and whatever the consequence of that is going to happen, I can't control that. But I'm just going to be present and you know do the best job I can for the task that's in front of me.
You try to get into that state of flow in a way. And when you were talking, it's often kind of reminded me of synchronicity, how certain points in time just connect to the next point and they lead to that success where, like, because of how you were and the experiences you had when you had that client, Gabby, obviously, where even though you're past your due date and you needed to get it done sooner, financially wise, personal wise, like mindset wise, you could not let it go out incomplete. And because you stuck with them, it got you way more business in the long run. So it was actually financially profitable in the long run, anyways. And before we have a couple more questions before we wrap up too. But before I do, when you thought made me think of something that I completely forgot about, but PolyInnovator is my personal brand. It's something I created to be my online presence, right? I care more about that name than I do my actual name. And so I was like, I need to make sure my website is the best I can make it. And so I went to like Gary Vee, Lewis House, Hormozy, like any big name creator, just a personal brand I could think of. I think Mel Robbins as well, actually, at one point, and Tony Robbins. I just tried to look at everybody's website. I had at least like 13 of them. And what I did was I made a Google Sheets and I was like, okay, in each section, what did they have in that section? Did they link to their podcast or their book? Or like what was their call to action? So what was their hero section? What was the banner in between? What was the testimonials? Like what did they have in each section? And then I just had them all kind of lined up next to each other in different columns. And I would compare each person's sites. And I tried to take the best of all the worlds. Like what was the best option in that particular part of the site? And I feel like I need to do that again at some point. But that was just a fun experiment, and I thought you might enjoy that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think you're doing it right. That's I actually think that's how anyone that's like trying to do something for the first time, whether it's you're building your website or starting a business, you should look at all the things that all the top players are doing already, and then see what's the pattern. What is the same thing they're all doing, right? Because most likely, if they're all doing it, there's a reason why they're doing it.
They have a very logical. They probably have a team helping them too, but like, yeah. Next question here. It seems that
like you don't want to be too on those websites. You don't want to be too unique. You don't want to be like, you don't want to stand out too much, like too different from the rest, because when somebody comes to your website, there are certain things that they're used to seeing that they're looking for. For example, like, somebody might be coming to your website and looking for a link that says podcast, right? And because that's what they're used to. They're like, all these other people have a link called podcast, so that they're used to it. So when they come to your website, they want to click on podcast. But all of a sudden, instead of, you want to be clever and you say listened, or like you say you use a different word like audio or something like that, then you're making it less user friendly, because they're looking for the podcast. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. It made me think about my site. Like I have a content link, or like start here button, and then underneath there's a drop down to my video, blog, and podcast, and that way I can give them whatever links they need. So if they need Apple or Spotify, it's there. But
I see what you mean.
But it's like
I would say the one that you really want to drive people to, you should put it on the top nav, not on the sub nav. Like if you really want to like drive people to the podcast, so like the top things that you want people to go to, you should try to put that all on the main navigation, like not on their drop down.
That's a good point. So I just want to make sure I give her a shout out. It seems like Gigi is a phenomenal part of your life. She has been seemingly everywhere with you. Every time I saw you, she was obviously with you there too. And so how has your relationship evolved through your journey?
Yeah, Gigi is basically like the part that you don't see, right? She's kind of camera shy. She doesn't like being in the public eye. But like I pretty much wouldn't be here without Gigi. And it's kind of like before you were talking about, we need this type of people, but we also need this type of people, like that thing. Like we need generalists and we need specialists. We need, like my weakness happens to be her strength. So for me, like I said, like I tend to just focus on things and drag it out. But I think that's how I'm able to come up with certain work I do, right? But the downside of that is I'm terrible at making money, right? Like I might go on a 1 hour coaching call with the client who's paying me for the 1 hour, and I end up spending like 3 hours with them, or like or like Gabby's project, right? Like I'm supposed to finish it on this number of hours, but I drag it on because I want to make the best one. So I'm just not really great at making money, right? And that's kind of where Gigi comes in. She's like the more conscientious, like she's like the orderly side to my creative. So she manages all the money. She makes sure that we get paid. She's the one that makes sure that we're profitable. If we need to raise, like, good example is, in the first year of my agency, we were so broke. We spent all of our money that we started the business. We're so broke that we had to rent out our apartment on Airbnb and use that money that we make from the Airbnb to pay for our business expense, like to make up for our losses in the business, right? And we were sleeping in the office because of that. And during that time, like I was so busy, so she was like, so we're like, she's gonna be in charge of the money, the business side, on all of that. And like a year later, what ended up happening is I would always argue with her. I'm like, no, we can't raise the price. We can't raise the price. No, that's too much. Or like, I'm kind of that person. It's like, no, that's gonna piss off the clients. So no, we can't charge him extra for this additional work we did because we need to do this extra work in order to make the website better. But at some point, like, so I would always like argue with her about that. But at some point, like, I found out that she raised the prices, like, without telling me. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I was kind of like, kind of screaming at her. And then she's like, son, that's fine. Like, I already talked to the client. They're fine. They agree with me. They think we should have raised the prices. and not only that, they've been paying that price for months now, the higher price. And not only that, like, we looked at the bank account, and like within 6 months, we went from being in debt to having like $200,000 in the bank. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, and she made that happen. Right. So now that's why I said the balance is important, because like now I can just focus on being the best at what I do. And her focus is making sure we make money. And that's why I think we make a good team. And
that's okay.
So that's why I say she's like the person that makes all of this happen, that's not in front of the camera.
Well, like before our call, I was communicating with her rather than you before, like getting this all set up and whatnot. But me and her, like, we get along fine. Like, I don't know, it was funny at the conference. Me and her were just chatting at one point. It was funny that you're saying that she was like camera shy, because when I saw her talking with people, she was super friendly and like went out and engaged multiple people.
Yeah, she's an extrovert. So she loves like talking, she loves networking, all of that. But she's very private too. So she doesn't like being in the public eye.
Before I ask the final question, I got to highlight that the extrovert doesn't want to be on the camera. The introvert is on camera.
Yeah, right. I'm actually like not very private. I'm an open book. Right? Like I don't mind people knowing all about my business.
Well, and speaking of the business, I just wanted to mention too, like, you do have to know when to charge more. And it's ironic because I'm like you, where I don't want to charge more. I'm a lot more like you in that regard, but I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit even since I was 8 or 9. And so I do like to have a little bit of sales in me. I understand, like, if I want to make a sale happen, that kind of thing. And at one point over the last few years as a swim instructor, I usually teach in the summer times, regardless of what I'm doing. I have time to do something like that. I went from doing $150 for 6 hours, which is $25 an hour is not that much for the amount of value I'm exchanging, to $300, so it's $50 an hour. And I feel like that was a lot more effective. And pretty much everybody was like, okay, yeah. Like, some of them were actually trying to get me to do it sooner. And I'm just like, it was hard for me to fathom. So I get that.
That's what happened to us.
That's why I'm sharing my story, because I'm like, I understand completely what you're saying. Like, it's like, oh, it's hard. All right, so last question here. Just this summer, you had made your first 12-week mentorship course. How does that feel, and what does it entail?
Yeah, so my mentorship program wasn't even something that I was planning to do, but I sent out an email saying I'm gonna do mentorship group, like almost like a mastermind group, and I didn't even promote it. I just sent out an email in my mailing list, and like it got filled up by the next day.
Oh wow, yeah, like hey.
So we just did it, and yeah, and the reason why I did it is because at Night Owl Nation I teach storytelling and all of that, and I teach storytelling, how to write stories, how to create content, but because I'm a polymath, I feel like I have a lot more to offer. Like I feel like I can actually offer advices on how to do your sales page, like how to do your sales page in a way you can convert, like how to actually work one-on-one to like what is your differentiator and how can I message your brand in a way, like, so all the things that I do with my clients, or I can even look at a design and give you design critiques, all those other things. Like I can look at your sales funnel and see where where you can improve. So actual like practical business advice,
Yeah.
like marketing advice. And people were asking me for those, but I'm not teaching any of that at Night Owl Nation, because Night Owl Nation is purely about storytelling, content creation, and things like that. So then I because so many people were asking for that, and I just decided to. And also, like, there are a lot of members who are freelancers that want to kickstart their freelancing agency business, and they want to know how I did it, right? How did I build my agency and things like that, those insider information. So that's why I decided to do the mentorship. And I said, hey, if you want, come in for 2 hours every week and then ask me any questions you want. I'll review whatever sales page you have. And we kind of started off like that. So this was my first round that we're just wrapping up, I think, next week. It's going to be the end of it. Everyone's loving it. So we're going to do it again in the next quarter. So it's a 3-month program. This round, because we were just starting off, we were like, it's going to be $4,000. And like I said, it got filled up right away. And there's like now people in the waiting list. So now Gigi's raising the price.
It better be 8.
Of course.
Better be 8.
To 6.
Oh.
Yes, no, she's raising it to 6. But what we're doing is instead of meeting every week, we're meeting every other week. But yeah, I think it's really for the people who, I think these are for the people who have a business, who really want to, like, who can get the mentorship. You know how it is, like sometimes when you coach people, like that person you said, like they have to be ready, right? Because sometimes I'll coach people, I'm like, I want you to post this kind of content, at least 3 times a week or whatever it is, and they just won't do it, right? They think they know better. They're like, nah, that's when you usually meet people that are not coachable, that's how they are. They're like, son, you don't understand. That's not gonna work for me. Right? I'm like if I say I want you to post every day, or I want you to do, be consistent in your posting. I want you to, like, not give up and start an mailing list, or do this funnel. When I give these kind of advices that I know for a fact is gonna work, they're like, son, you don't understand. That doesn't work for me, and they just don't do it, right? And I'm like, no, I understand exactly. You have to do it, right? And so it's kind of hard to coach those kind of people. But I feel like people who are already at a certain level in their business, they're actually more coachable.
Yeah.
They're more.
Well, it's not just the level of their business; it's also the level of relationship with you. That's something that you made. You gave me an idea, but about like when you're offering more than one subject, like for multidisciplinary personal brands, for example. Like Polymath is my main topic, right? That's just the umbrella topic that I talk about. It's my main meta niche, if you will. But underneath there, I have swimming, I have content repurposing, I have gaming, I have, education. I have a lot of different sub niches that I go into. Each one of them might have different funnels. Each one of them does have different funnels, because those are different topics, and they're not all going to really link together for most people. I'll have content that links them together, like swimming and education. They can go together pretty well. But my point was saying, like, for the mass audience, they may only know you as like the polymath guy or the storytelling guy or something like that. But then once you get someone that first kind of like first layer of people. Okay, they're gonna take your course, buy your book, something like that. But they know you as the swimming guy. They know you as the copywriting guy. Just that one topic, just one of your sub niches. Then they get a little bit deeper. They might take one of your bigger groups. They join the Night Owl Nation, something like that, and they start like, okay, like I'm here because he's storytelling, teaching me storytelling. But he knows a lot of other stuff too. I like that.
Yeah.
And then it leads into that high ticket because they had that relationship built with you. They understand, wait, he knows more than just that. I can get that high ticket thing so I can get the other thing that I want.
That's a good point. Yeah, usually I think people find you through one topic, and then once they get to know you more, it's kind of like the first time I think I listened to Joe Rogan was because Gary Vee was on.
Oh yeah,
right, or something like that. And then the more I listened to him, like he had all these other topics that he talks about archery or like whatever, right? He talks about jiu-jitsu and UFC and all these other things. So like you learn those other aspects about it, and I think that's the power of personal brand, right? Because most people you meet is not just one thing. They have diverse interests and they have
hobbies and stuff.
Other areas of
So wrapping up here, where can people find you online? And I know that's a loaded question.
I think for me the best place is going to be Instagram, because that's kind of where I post all my content. All my links are on there. So it's Instagram at sun.e, which is sun.yi.
I have that at the top of your links now. I actually have a ton of links for you down here, so we don't have to worry about that as much. But what would be a...
Thank you so much.
Of course. I always feel like when I go to... you and I are similar. We listen to the same kind of podcast. I'll go to some podcasts like this, and they'll either not have links or they have like 2 links. And I'm like,
I know.
I want to be able to see what these people are doing. Give me more. And so I decided...
I also hate it when I watch a clip of something or somebody like reacting to something, and I want to see the original video, but they don't put it. I'm like, how am I gonna search the internet to find this?
So, son, you did that to me.
I did.
I was watching a clip. I don't remember. Maybe Natalia, I think her name was. It was a clip on your channel. I think a 10-minute clip from a podcast episode. And I was like, I want to know more about Natalia. And it wasn't linked to the other one. I had to go like.
Yeah, you're right. Like I actually should, like, my video editors do all that. But you're right. This is actually a great lesson, because a lot of times we can't see ourselves. We can't put wear the other person's shoes, right? And I actually think marketing is like that. Is being able to see the other person's perspective, and so yeah, you taught me a lesson. I should definitely be better about putting links to full episodes.
And then on top of that, like being able to put a lot of links of the person in the description. I try to make sure I do that for my guests. And I want to also just side note this, putting links to the shorts now, because there's that new feature, the content links feature. Yeah. And I'm going to have to go in to like hundreds of videos now to just like, I have about 12 clips per video. And so I'm going to go in. You have to do it on desktop. You can't do it on mobile for some reason. But you go on desktop, you click the content link, and you can link it to the main video. So that way your shorts can link to the main.
You mean you put it in the description, or you put it in the comments?
Neither. So that's what people used to do, but those links no longer work anymore. There's actually a new feature called content links that goes right underneath the title. And like when you're scrolling on your phone.
Oh, within shorts? Yeah. Within each short?
And so like...
Oh, I'm going to have to take a look at that.
Yeah, it's so super weird. That's why I wanted to mention it, because someone watching this is definitely going to want to know more about that too. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And the final thing here, what is the call to growth for the audience to do?
That's a very wide open question. Okay, here's one thing I'll say, because I'm really into this right now. I'm all about being selfless now, meaning like serving, right? Like, so I used to look at it as like, a lot of people look at it as like, oh, I wanna do an awesome job for Gabby, so she'll introduce me to some new people, right? I want to go on this podcast so that maybe he'll introduce me to some people, like kind of like we give with an agenda, right? But just like that, kind of focusing on whatever is in front of you thing. What I find is like, if I look at all the greatest thing that I did, it just happened because I was serving, or I was giving just for the sake of giving, because that makes me happy. Like, you know, you ever like give a gift to somebody that, you know, like a surprise gift, right? Like that person had no idea you were doing this, and they didn't even know that they like they didn't even know that you knew that they wanted this thing. And then as soon as they open it, they're like, oh my gosh, how did you even know that I wanted this? Right? That, like, there's nothing that, and the same thing when you're probably teaching swimming and you see somebody get it and you see their eyes light up and you're like, oh, like you know that you've given that person that gift. Like, there's nothing that feels better than that, right? And for me, the call to growth would be do everything in life with that mentality. Like, if you're cooking for someone, just really cook for them, really go all out and do the best job to make that, serve that person. Like, even if you're taking out the garbage or every little thing, if you're really coming from that place, I just feel like it always comes back to you tenfold, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say serve is
Well,
really serve.
thank you for the gift of you coming on the show today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Once again, this is Dustin, PolyInnovator, and Sun Yi on the Polymath Polycast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Innovators crave innovative products, which is exactly why the Polymath Polycast is powered by Riverside.fm. With Riverside, you can achieve studio quality without the need for an actual studio. You'll get uncompressed audio and up to 4K video from the comfort of your own home. All recordings are done locally, which means that you and your guests will get the highest quality possible, even with unreliable internet. Hi, I'm Kendall from Riverside, and do yourself a favor and upgrade from cloud-based softwares like Skype, Zoom, or Hangouts. Try out Riverside today and use the link in the show notes because your groundbreaking content deserves to look and sound its very best.